living as a godly Christian in a godless country. That seems like that the closer we get to heaven, the closer we get to the rapture, the more ungodly it becomes, the more that sin abounds in the wickedness of man. We think, wow, it can't get any worse than this. And then mankind says, oh yeah, watch this. And it just gets worse and worse. And so we looked at 4 thoughts so far in this particular series. We started off in Daniel chapter 1, the new minority, where it seems like sometimes that Christians are on the outs. When our country used to be founded by Christians, and that is what prayer was in schools, the Bible was taught in schools, all these types of things. And now it seems like it's not that way anymore. But that does not mean that we stop doing what God's called us to do. The second thought was this, and I believe it was Daniel, I forget which passage, but the new priority, that sometimes our priorities get upside down. Before we are saved, our priorities for the most part, just as a blanket statement, is us. What makes me better in life, all these types of things. But now that we are Christian, we are believers, our priority has changed, and our priority isn't the same as the world's priority at all. And then we looked at the new authority in Saul's life, where they wanted a new king, and we are living in the midst of people that don't want Christ or God as their king. They want to be the kings of themselves, a humanistic view, but he is still should be the ultimate authority in our lives. And last week, Daniel chapter 6, the new fidelity, or being faithful. What are we faithful to, or what are you trying to be loyal to? And so then this evening, we're going to look at Romans chapter 12, sum it up all together with this thought, the new conformity, or what you are conforming to. Now, Caleb knows this because he's in school. There are certain stages of mass, or what mass can be. For instance, a liquid, solid, or gas, right? Am I right, Caleb? Am I close? Okay, good. Making sure he's still alive back there. Liquid, solid, and gas. What's the difference between a liquid and a solid? We're like, oh, there's a lot of differences. If you put a solid, we'll say ice, into a cup, does the ice change its form? No. It sticks to that cube that it is. If you put water in a square cup, what color is the water at that point? Square. It fits to whatever it is poured into. It conforms, right? That's the idea. Did I mess up something? That's a color. I knew it. And when I saw one person, like, okay, they could have something in their mind. But when I see half the people with a smirk, I said something wrong. Okay. I said shape. You heard color. That's how that works. So I did say color. I almost said it again. What shape is the water? Square, because square is not a color, obviously. All right. So it conforms to whatever you put it in, right? We as Christians, unfortunately, there's a lot of Christians out there, wherever you put that Christian, it conforms to whatever the standard or whatever the thing is, whether it's work, whether it's hobbies, whether it's ball playing, whether it's church. And unfortunately, some churches are doing the same thing depending on what the world wants. They're changing their philosophies. I almost said theologies. Theologies can't change. But they're changing the practices to fit what the world seems to want them to fit. So a new conformity. In this last message in this series here, we will bring this thought to a closing thought. That's the foundation or the common thread in the last 4 messages. As we looked at Daniel, In Daniel chapter 1, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In Daniel chapter 3, in Daniel chapter 6, they had all of this in common. And it's the last two words on the screen there, to be different. To stick out like a sore thumb. I'm not saying be different because you are an odd duck. I'm different in more than one way, but to be different that when people see us, they can tell you're not like the world. You act different. You talk different. Your mannerisms are different. They can just tell. I think about this thought, the Israelite laws. Why did God give Israel such very strict laws, as in you cannot have the clothing of multiple fabrics? Because they wanted to be set apart from everyone else that was around them. So when you saw Israelites' clothing, you knew that was an Israelite's clothing. That was the idea in every part of the Israelites' life, to be different, to be set apart. In our lives, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, in verse 17, Paul says this, "Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, I will receive you." That is, we need to not be part of them, to separate ourselves. Titus chapter 2, in verse number 14, "Who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from all iniquity, and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works." What does that peculiar mean? It just means set apart, different, not the same. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse number 9. "But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." If we are acting the same, living the same priorities, same authorities as the world, can we show them the marvelous light? No, because they only see us as being one of them. Why should I want what you want when you are doing what I'm doing? I don't need what you have. So let's look at some thoughts here. We live in a day and age when so-called Christians act like, look like, talk like, and think like the world around them. And I would say more or less think like. We'll get to that point later on in this message. But think like, our mentality is the same. And unfortunately, churches have become socially and politically correct. That we don't want to rock the boat. Now, I'm not saying that, what's the saying, that people have a chip on their shoulders, and some people want to knock off that chip just to have a fight. I'm not saying that we knock off chips from the world's shoulder. If we act the way God wants us to act, the chip is going to fall. There's going to be a difference that is seen. Christians have been brainwashed by the, unfortunately, cotton candy type of preaching from the pulpits, and brainwashed by the pressure to be liked by God and approved by the world. That is impossible. Christians are trying to do the same thing. I know that I need to be holy like God, but I also want to be approved by the world that is around me. You cannot have both. John chapter 15, 18 through 25. "If the world hate you, ye know that it hated me before it hated you." Verse 19. "If you were of the world would love his own. But because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. Remember the word that I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they have kept my saying, they will keep yours also. But all these things will they do unto you for my name's sake, because they know not him that sent me. If I had not come and spoken unto them, they had not had sin, but now they have no cloak for their sin. He that hateth me hateth my Father also. If I had not done among you them the works which none other man did, they had not had sin, but now have they both seen and hated both me and my and my Father. But this cometh to pass, that the word might be fulfilled that is written in their law, they hated me without a cause. How many times in that passage is hated me mentioned? He's saying that, hey, this world does not like me. Even the religious crowd put Christ on the cross, right? And so we cannot do both. And here's where you find out, it says in Romans chapter 12 and verse number 1. Paul says, I beseech, I plead, I beg you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. The first thing I want to see is this: I beseech, or there is a plea. Paul is pleading, I beseech, I beg, I urge, I strongly plead with you. What? That you present your bodies or be not conformed. Paul is issuing a strong plea. The same plea that calls out to us today. Now, some may say, well, it's easier for Paul to not conform in his world because they didn't have all the things that we have. It's true. They didn't have television and Facebook and all those types of things. Paul had to go inside the bank to do his checking and not outside the bank to do his checking. All these types of things. But Paul also lived in an age where they were crucifying, persecuting Christians constantly in every place that he went. And so the same plea that Paul has given to the Romans is given to us. Here is a plea: I beseech you, I beg of you. It's a personal plea. I beseech you, Paul said. He doesn't say, I beseech the church. I beseech y'all. He said, I beseech you. This is a plea we all must accept as individuals. It's not as, okay, church, we as a whole, we will accept this. No, it's the individuals. I am going to accept this plea. I hear the urge. I hear the plea, and I am going to do what Paul says in the next few words. It's also a passionate plea. Paul considered this quote-unquote request very important. Let me ask you this. Outside of our salvation, what could be more important in our lives than bringing other people to Christ? I would say probably not much, if anything, outside glorifying God as a whole. So if we are living on both sides of the fence, and we are not transformed to God but conformed to this world, what message are we giving out? That you can live your life as you want, and when you die, you will probably go to heaven too. Because they only see the outside. They can't see our hearts. They only see us. And if we have not different than them, what makes them special? For instance, I was overhearing some people talk, and one person said to another person, there are different businesses in town that's like yours. What sets yours apart? Oh, that's a good question. For instance, can you get a burger from a lot of restaurants here in town? Yes. Even the Mexican restaurant my son goes to, he gets a hamburger. We went to Ty's Dynasty, is that what it was? And they ordered a hamburger. I'm like, you can get a hamburger from any place. So if I were to start a hamburger business, they would say, well, what makes yours better than anybody else's in town? If I said, I don't know, would they eat mine? No. If I said, oh, let me tell you what sets mine apart, and I gave them a straight answer, and then they tasted it, wow, it is different. See, we can say why a Christian is different, but until they see it in our lives, they don't quite understand. That's what the plea is here. Continuing in verse number 1. We to beseech you that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice. Now, that seems to be an oxymoron. A living sacrifice. What happens when you have a sacrifice, or the Old Testament when you have a sacrifice, what happened to that animal or whatever it was? It died. It was burnt. So a living sacrifice. Paul is saying, just like the sacrifices that we once did, that is how we ought to live our lives. And how is that holy, acceptable unto God? And this is just your reasonable service. Don't pat yourself on the back. Don't toot your own horn. Don't be like, oh, look what I'm doing. I am transformed. I presented my body a living sacrifice. Look at me. No, that's what you're supposed to do. That is just reasonable because of what Christ did for us. For instance, what if Cody is 20 years old, and I get a phone call. He's like, guess what, Dad? I'm like, oh, man, what? I just brushed my teeth without you telling me to. Oh, isn't that great? Oh, man. I just want you to know that. I'd be like, are you okay? Yeah, and I was like, man, I just want you to know that what you taught me years ago, I'm doing now. I'd be like, you should be doing that now for like, I don't know, 17 years plus by yourself. You know, that's just reasonable, right? But if my 2-year-old, if I have a 3-year-old, said, Dad, guess what? Look, I brushed my teeth by myself. Don't they look good? But hey, that's nice. Sometimes we as Christians, we do what's reasonable, and we think we are somebody. Look at us. Ooh, real special. No, that's just reasonable to God. So here, number 2 is this. We have a plea, I beseech. Then we have a presentation. Present your bodies a living sacrifice. What was important to Paul was what was being presented. What is the object? This was no simple Smith's gift or a gift being presented, but it was and is a life-changing presentation. Somebody gave me, it's a re-gift. I'm not sure how many times this gift has been re-gifted, but it's traveled around. But somebody gave me a candle because in celebration of my new job opportunity. I'm not telling you what it says, but it's like, oh, that's hilarious. That's funny. It was just a simple gift. It should be a retirement gift. That's what you get when you retire. And so there's a simple gift. Is that type of gift what Paul is talking about? It's just not an ordinary presentation. It is something that is life transforming in a person's life. It's not just, God, here's my life. It is transforming. That present your bodies. Get a little bit into the grammatical part here. In English, we have 3 tenses as a whole. 3 tenses, past, present, and future. All right, you passed that grade. Good. Past, present, and future. In Greek, there's 4. There is past, present, future, what we call aorist. A-O-R-I-S-T. In aorist, and I will try to explain this in English. In aorist, it is a combination of all 3. Like, well, how's that? Yeah, it's like, how's that possible? It's the idea is this. It is a action that happened in the past that is still happening now and will continue to happening in the future. So it's a one-time act that carries the implications of that now and will continue that in the future. That's the idea with that word, present your bodies a living sacrifice. It is an action that happened in the past or should have happened in the past. It continues to carry on throughout the future. So it's not just a one-time thing. It's a one-time thing and a continual thing at the same time. That is what this present means. So, but there is a requirement. What is the requirement for this? That ye present what? Your bodies a living sacrifice. The requirement is not this, that you present your best friend to God. You present your spouse. You present your kids. So it's present us, our bodies. Romans chapter 6 and verse number 13. Neither yield ye your members as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin, but yield yourselves unto God as those that are alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness unto God. Galatians chapter 5 and verse number 1. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. It is we are to present our bodies no longer bonded by sin, but yield ourselves as instruments unto God. What is the requirement? Our bodies, our lives, our everything. That's the idea. When it says present your bodies, present your everything. Holy, acceptable unto God, which is your original source. What is that? It's your body, it's your marriage, it's your relationships, it's your finances, it is your job, it is everything in life is presented to God. And who is the recipient of this particular gift? We must remember who we are giving our lives to. It is to Christ. The one who is owed everything. We cannot earn our salvation. We did not earn our salvation. Never could we have. He paid all of that, and it just makes sense that we yield our bodies back to Him. He is the recipient of this presentation, and that makes all the difference in the world. How many of you have ever given something to someone and they did not receive it well, or they like, oh, that's it? How many like, know what? That makes me want to give them something else. Like, no, I want to take that gift back from them. They're not very grateful for the gift that they got. You know, it's not just a human that we can disappoint. It's not just a human that thinks to themselves, well, that's not good enough. It's God saying, I want all of you. That makes the difference. The recipient makes the gift special and important. How many of you have something in your house right now that if I saw that, it would be of little importance to me, but to you it means a lot because of the person that gave it to you? I've got a lot of those in my house. A lot. I have this, I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, but when I was in grade school, this older, my dad remember his name, Mr. Driggers, I think is his name. I was in third grade, and he was in our church, older guy, and he would do some woodworking and stuff. And he made a Georgia Bulldog paperweight and gave it to me. I still have that. I usually put it on every desk that I have. You would think that is not a very good-looking Georgia Bulldog. Boy, that doesn't look that great, but to me, it's awesome. Like, man, look at that. We all have those things. It's the recipient that makes the difference. And then what's the reason for this? Why should we present our bodies? Which is your reasonable service. It just makes sense. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. What? Know ye not that your body is a temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, that you have of God, and you are not your own, but for you are bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. The idea is this: the price was free, but it wasn't cheap. The price of everlasting life of heaven was free to us, but it was not a cheap gift. So therefore, yield our bodies, sacrifice our bodies to Him. Number 3. The plea, the presentation in verse number 2. With all of that being said, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. What is the process of this new conformity? This process is simple in theory, but difficult in practice. How many of you have ever tried to learn something, and the person that is helping you learn this particular skill has done it for years, and he or she is like, oh, just do this. It's so simple. This, and you'll be done. And you're like, yeah, no. Oh, if you would just turn your hand this way, and this way, it'll work perfectly. I'm like, I can't do. How do you do that? Oh, it's just natural. No, it's not. For instance, I asked people this morning about math. Math to me came natural. It's just how my mind works. And so when I'm teaching kids, I'm like, oh, just do this and this. And they're like, that's not how my mind works. Okay, let's back up here. And so here in theory, Paul's like, oh, just do this. But the practice is difficult. Because once you put into everyday life, kids have asked me, the smart kids ask me, because they are common sense kids, and they say, Coach, that's what they call me, Coach, why do we have to know algebra? Because you're required to if you want to graduate. That was my answer first thing. You ain't got a choice, pal. And then they asked me this question. Hey, Coach, besides teaching us, when was the last time you used algebra in life? I'm like, all right, page number 22. Let's continue on. Like, that's a good question. That's a good question. And I said, to be honest, I've used the Pythagorean theorem a lot. That's almost geometry, but it's algebra. I've used algebra in different things in life actually to figure stuff out. But I also said this. I said, how many of you are Albert Einstein? Like, not me. They always look to this one kid in class because he's the smarty pants. Don't look at me. And then I said, how many of you are going to get married, have a kid? Do you know if your kid could be the next Albert Einstein? Like, not my kid. I said, did you know that if you could help your kid do algebra in school, that it might make your relationship easier in life? If he could just sit down and teach them something, show them something. Oh, cool. Dad's not an idiot. He's like my teacher. Wow. It's just helpful for your kids to do their homework, if nothing else. If you want to graduate, take my class. That's pretty much the answer. And so sometimes they're like, hey, but I don't understand why I have to do this. And sometimes we say, God, why? Why do I have to present my body a living sacrifice? Why do I have to transform and not conform? It's difficult when I get out into the real world. The process, first of all, is this: not conformed. You know how easy it is to conform? Oh, it's so easy. It's easier to conform than not to conform. None of us, in the things that we love the most, hobbies, work, like to stand out like a sore thumb. None of us likes to be talked about behind our backs. None of us want to be the one that doesn't get invited to conversations or to eat with them or whatever the case may be. None of us like that. But if we were aiming for that, then we'll start conforming our lives to kind of fit in. You see that in school all the time, where kids who were once good kids, did what was right, went by the student handbook, now they're fitting in with the other crowd and no longer caring about the rules. That's a very mild illustration. Just because they were tired of getting, quote unquote, made fun of. It's tiresome when it seems like I do what I'm supposed to do, but nobody else cares. Not conformed. 1 John chapter 2, 15 through 17. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of the Father, the will of God, abideth forever. What is the will of God in that verse? To love not the world. To don't be conformed. This has to do with, we Americans think about our freedoms. In America, are we free? Yes. Do we have freedoms? Yes. In America, we are free, and men sacrifice for that freedom. And we should thank God every day for the men and women who have sacrificed and are still sacrificing for the freedoms that we have. But we aren't free to do whatever we want to do in this country. You see, freedom has limitations. Can you go into a theater right now, Pony Village Theater, walk in there and say, fire? Are you allowed to do that? You have the freedom to do that. Are the consequences? Oh, yes. Will you probably go to jail? Yes. Why? Because you just can't say what you want to say when you want to say it. Do I have the freedom to take Myrna's purse without her beating me up? Probably not, because she'll beat me up. But if she wasn't looking, could I take her purse? Sure, I have the freedom to do that. Are the consequences? Yes. Just because you have freedoms doesn't mean that you should. Just because you have freedoms doesn't mean you can do what you want to do. Just because we are free in Christ doesn't mean we can do what we want to do. Now, a lot of people think that. That because Christ has made us free, I am free to do as I wish. Freedom means freedom from the bondage of sin. But we can choose to put those bonds back on if we do sin. Christ paid for our freedom, but we are not free to do whatever we like. That is being not conformed. I choose not to think that way. I choose not to do that. I choose not to have the same viewpoints. And then not only conformed to the world, but the opposite is true. Completely changed. But be ye transformed. I think I've used this illustration before. What is a biological example of being transformed? Well, we would say a caterpillar to a butterfly. That is almost completely opposite. One crawls, one flies. One is ugly, one is beautiful. One can go from point A to point B slow. One goes from point A to point B faster. Completely different. If you were to take a 3-year-old kid or a 2-year-old and say, are these two things alike? They would say, no. If you say, guess what? This butterfly used to be a caterpillar. Nuh-uh. Why? Because it's simple looking at it. That's completely changed. Can somebody look at you and say, who knew you before and after Christ, boy, you are completely changed. You are not like you used to be. I am not stuck. I get into these genres of musics stuck. I'm listening to the cathedrals. I mentioned that the other day. Old quartet music, that kind of thing. The bass singer, George Yance, is one of the greatest bass singers, just his voice as a whole. And he sang a song that says that about being changed, that I'm not the man I used to be. He said, the first verse, I would come home drunk and my kids would run away. And then I met Christ. He changed my life. And now I come home and my kids say, wow, Dad, you've changed. That's the idea. That people say there's something different about me that completely changed. And how does it start? By the renewing of your mind. Can we completely change if we start on the outside? No. In fact, if we try to change the outside first, that turns into religious legalism. that you're just conforming to a structure like you did to the world's structure. But if you change the mind, the heart first, the outside will change. What does that renew mean? By the renewing of your mind, renew means this: a complete renovation. How many of you like to renovate things? Like, for instance, I saw somebody take toilets and put them outside into like these planter boxes, and it looked beautiful after that. I was like, dude, you took a nasty toilet and turned it into something really cool looking. Anybody like to do that kind of stuff? Or maybe take a table and refinish it, that kind of stuff? Or how many of you would take houses and renovate houses? You know, how many of you like to watch those kind of shows? Like, wow, that's an ugly house. Whoa, look what they did. Is it still a house from the start to finish? Yes. Do you know that complete renovation is we are not the same? Nothing like we used to be. It's a complete renovation. And then number 4, verses 2 and 3, and then we'll be done. At the end of verse 2, that's good and acceptable in the perfect will of God. Verse 3, for I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. Number 4, there is a proving. It says that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. What's God's will for our lives? Simply put, don't be conformed and be transformed. What does God want me to do? Simply put, don't be conformed and be transformed. The simple will of God. And then the second part, verse number 3. We see not only the will of God, but the worship of man. So what happens is we stop being conformed, start being transformed. Everybody's like, boy, you are new. Look at you. And you're like, oh, yeah. Well, look at me. And we start transforming to be pleased by man. And verse 3 says, nah, that's not what verse 1 and verse 2 is about. It's not about being man pleasers, but to think himself as God has dealt with us by the grace of God and through the measure of that faith. We don't want to be transformed because sometimes we don't think we need it. I'm okay where we are. We think too highly of ourselves. That's what verse 3 also is. I don't need that. I'm as good exactly where I am. No, we all need to be more transformed into what Christ wants us to be. So as we have closed every message with this idea of daring to be a Daniel, daring to be a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in this day and age, dare to be transformed. Boy, you will stick out like a sore thumb if you say, God, I want to be transformed. Not like I used to be, not like the world. I'm not saying I'm goofy or I can't have friends or I can't, get along with my coworkers. I'm not saying that. You can do all of those things still. They can still look at you and think to themselves, oh, I probably shouldn't say that joke around you. I probably shouldn't use those words around you. That's the thought. Not as you want, but as God wants. God, how do you want me to be transformed? Let's pray. God, thank you for our forgiveness. Thank you for this time that we can come this evening and open your word as we close this section, this series. I pray that we will be a people that will live in this country, in the place that you put us. Yes, around seems to be wicked, and it is. That we will stay true, stay strong, and not be conformed to what goes on, but stay transformed